Hey y'all, it's Desiree and I'm back with another video. And for this video, God is saying, will you give him your heart? Give God your heart again. When it comes to this faith walk, I feel that a lot of us have this perception that we only give God our heart one time. But in actuality, we never stop giving God our hearts. Giving God your heart is what separates religion from relationship. A lot of times when people think of Christianity, they think of everything pieced together perfectly. They think of everything very routine. They commit to good works. They commit to acts of obedience. They commit to acts of sacrifice, but never truly sacrifice their hearts. We tend to have such a great fear surrounding messing up, not looking the part, getting it wrong, that we walk around as if everything is okay when everything is not okay. We keep hollering about God works out everything for the good of those who love him, but we don't truly feel like God is working it out for the good, and we don't truly see his goodness when we look around. Because it's hard to truly see the goodness of God when you're still holding on to your heart, when you're still holding on to old versions of your heart. Old feelings, old emotions, old concerns, old doubts, old ways of understanding. And it doesn't have to necessarily be traumatic, it just has to be expired. Because you aren't going to get far lugging an old heart around. And you're not going to get far lugging a heart around that's not yours to carry in the first place. Sometimes people experience a great deal of stagnation in their walk with God, and it's because they need to give God their heart again. And the enemy will try to keep you bound to this place in hopes that you are not able to give God your heart again in order to release the old, as well as to continue preparing for the new. That's why the enemy loves bitterness, because if you remain bitter, you'll remain closed off. If you remain bitter, you'll clench onto your heart. You'll clench onto the very thing that's breaking you, that's hindering you, that's deterring you. Because the enemy knows as long as he can keep you in a place where you are afraid to bring God your heart, you don't trust God with your heart, feeling as though you don't want to honor God with your heart, or maybe even simply just not realizing that you need to bring him your heart. He can keep feeding you the same lies on repeat. He can keep holding you bound. He can keep you depressed when the situation is already over and done with. He can keep you stressed when God already worked the situation out. He can keep you stuck on what left you when God already replaced it. Because in order to truly release the old, it's imperative that you give God your heart. In order to truly understand the why, it's imperative that you give God your heart. In order to see the good in the bad, you have to give God your heart. It's some people right now who haven't got started because of what they've experienced. It's some people right now who have a bad taste in their mouths concerning God because what he's allowed for them to experience. See how far that obedience gets you with a broken heart. See how far your faith gets you with a broken heart. See how far good works gets you when you can't seem to understand why was that done to you. It's some people scared to turn back to God because the same heart they gave him, he broke it. It's some people that's been trying to quietly put themselves back together in the presence of God, trying to do it side by side, but they don't trust him. I'm afraid of you. And God is saying, just come to me. Just bring it to me. But last time you left me disappointed. Last time you left me feeling lonely. Last time you left me feeling without. But God is saying, I wasn't finished. You didn't let me finish. You are in the hands of the master builder. You can't just bring it to me one time. You gotta wake up and give God your heart daily. Sometimes it's minute by minute. Sometimes it's second by second. Because a few minutes ago, I could sit in it. A few minutes ago, I felt like I understood it. But then it hit me again. It hurt me again. Every time it hurts, you gotta give him your heart again. And you got to be willing to see it through the end. Because sometimes healing hurts worse than the original wound. Sometimes the healing outlasts the original wound. But I want to encourage somebody today that only God can make your heart like new. Only God can create a clean heart in you. Having somebody to talk to, lean on is great. Going to therapy, all of that is great. But if you would just be willing to trust him with your heart again. And I just want to put this out there. Just because you are not falling all out on the floor in tears, just because you are not in bed all day depressed, doesn't mean that you are over it. Doesn't mean that it isn't affecting you. Sometimes we think, well, I made something of myself and I get up and I go to work every day and I take care of my kids and that didn't stop anything. That don't mean you're healed, because it shows up in the way that you walk. It shows up in how you talk. It shows up in how you interact in your everyday relationships. You wear it in your eyes. You wear it in your smile. And if it's not healed, it's still at work. And the last thing I want to touch on regarding this point is, please understand that you cannot run off God by telling him how you feel. You cannot run off God by telling him just what you think about what you've experienced, about what he's doing. You're not going to offend God by asking him why. You're never going to offend God by trying to get a clear understanding. It's almost as if we have this idea that God just tosses us in a corner and says, take that, take that, take that, and don't complain and don't have anything to say because you're a child. Ain't no stand in a kid's place when it comes to God. Ain't no sit over there and be quiet and shut up and don't you get up when it comes to God. The last thing you want to do is experience an affliction that was meant to produce something, but because you cannot see the good in it, because you cannot then give that experience back to God, that thing that was supposed to promote you is now haunting you. That thing that was supposed to break chains now has you in chains. That same thing that was supposed to give sight to the blind has taken away your vision, and now you don't see the goodness. Open up your mouth and get an understanding. Open up your heart and gain an understanding. Because it doesn't matter how bad, how desperate you want to see God as good, you won't be able to see past your circumstance. You won't be able to see past your experiences without first giving him your heart again. And if you are never truly able to release the old, you can never truly be prepared for the new. As God takes us from glory to glory, territory to territory, assignment to assignment, he doesn't just train up our faith, he trains up our hearts. We focus a lot on the physical preparation of a blessing, of a thing that God is calling us to, that sometimes we overlook the heart preparation. And I think oftentimes we don't realize that sometimes when God calls us to something, when God speaks a word to us, we don't have what we need in order to receive it at that time. Our faith is not postured the way that it needs to be to receive it. Our hearts are not postured in a way that it needs to be to receive it. And I'm not saying that by way of rebuke. I'm not saying that by way of judgment. I'm not saying that by no fault of our own, simply because we have not been trained. What if I told you that some of the very things that you are waiting on, if God released it right now in this very second, your heart would faint? I know we've all heard that you can die of a broken heart, but what about if you see the goodness of God a little too soon, before you're quite ready? I don't think we truly understand that our eyes have to be trained to see. Our spirits have to be trained to see. Our hearts have to be trained to see. If you think about it, we spend this life on earth training to see God in his fullness, training to see the eternity of God in fullness. And it's no different when it comes to seeing his hand here on earth. I think sometimes we put too much focus on the blessing and not the blesser. Because you spoke the word, you said I was ready, but you ain't did it yet. But God is saying, but I wanted to get to know you in the process. I wanted you to learn my character in the process. I wanted to show you some things in the process. Sometimes it's not so much the product as it is the experience. And if you think about it, God is not a stagnant God. He's not a stationary God. But we look for the biggest God in stationary moments. Boom, you at the dealership and you sitting in the brand new car. Boom, you just sat down at your desk at your dream job. Boom, you look down at the pregnancy test and it's positive. And all of that is a blessing, but they're stationary moments. We sit back and wait for stationary moments to see a God that is not stationary. You want to really see his goodness? Catch him in traffic. You want to really see his goodness? Get active. Give him your heart again. I feel like a lot of people are sitting back waiting on a moment, and God is trying to wake them up to the experience. And I also feel that a lot of people are waiting on the moment that they're ready. When they lay down in the bed at night saying, oh, another day that it didn't happen, they say, I must not be ready. I must not deserve it. I must not have earned it yet. And God is saying, I've already spoken the word over you. In fact, I spoke it before the beginning of time. Go to bed, wake up, and give me your heart again. You're not waiting to be approved because you've been pre-approved and you cannot be denied. Stop asking God, what do I have to do to be ready? What do I have to do for you to release what you have for me? Because it's not serving you. Ask him, how can you give him your heart again? Because you're going to get weary if you keep on focusing on what God is doing and not focusing on the training. You're going to get weary if you keep on focusing on the blessing and not focusing on the experience. And if you're listening to this thinking, okay, that kind of sounds a little hard, that kind of seems like a bit much. It is. I ain't even gonna lie. It is. It's worth it, but it is. To keep putting your heart on the line time and time again. To keep on giving your heart again, heartbreak after heartbreak. Let down after let down, disappointment after disappointment, despite the confusion, despite the misunderstanding, despite the misinterpretation, to keep giving your heart when all you want to do is hide it. But I'd rather be disappointed in a moment than stagnant for a lifetime. I'd rather it not make sense now so that it'll make perfect sense later. I'll get quiet. I'll draw to myself. I'll cut the phone off. I'll let it get messy. I'ma thug it out with you, because I'm not looking for the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. Not when it's you who made the promise. It's a sense of security that you feel when you're comfortable giving God your heart. It's a sense of freedom that you feel even in the prison when you learn to get comfortable with giving God your heart. The fact that it don't make no sense makes perfect sense to me, because I know I can trust you with my heart. I'll go wherever you lead me when I know that I can trust you with my heart. What shall I fear when I know that I can trust you with my heart? Proverbs 4:23 says, above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it. Are you having a hard time holding on to your faith? When is the last time that you gave God your heart? Are you having a hard time seeing the light at the end of the tunnel? When is the last time that you gave God your heart? All that anxiety, all that fear is a byproduct of everything stored up in your heart. Psalm 55:22, cast your cares on the Lord and he will sustain you. He will never let the righteous be shaken. Give God your heart again.